Okay, welcome to the third exocad webinar with today's topic, Thimble Bridge on implants in 1 or 2 sessions. My name is Friedemann Stang. I'm an application specialist from Germany, and I'll be joined today by my lovely co-hosts, Michael Kohnen and Lucas Ciardullo. During the webinar, you'll be able to ask as many questions as you want. You can write them in a text in the panel on the right. Feel free to write them while I'm talking. If there's something, some question that will be important at the immediate moment, one of the co-hosts will just stop me and ask the question directly. Anything else we will answer at the end. We will have a Q&A in the end as well, so you have a chance to ask all of the questions you have on your mind. The webinar will, as always, at the end be uploaded, and you will have the option to review the whole webinar as well as the old webinars from last week and all the next ones as well. So
yes, as Friedemann said, so feel free to ask your questions already during the presentation, because we figured out that most of the webinars, a lot of questions came at the end of the show. And yes, then time was running out and we were not able to answer all the questions. We are trying anyways to do post-processing on the question and to ask to those questions as well, but it's always quite hard. So if you want, you can do it during the presentation, and even if it's very interesting or really related to what Friedemann is showing, then I can, or Lucas and I, we can interrupt Friedemann and discuss about your question directly during the presentation. Okay, thank you. Enjoy, and Friedemann, yeah.
Okay, ready to start. So first off, for thimble bridges, it's important to talk about the setup of the case. In the past versions, you had to set up a thimble bridge as a wax-up. So in your dental DB, you would have to select an anatomic wax-up or reduced wax-up and Pontics. Now, since the Plovdiv edition, you can just select a coping or an anatomic crown instead. Since for a thimble bridge, you're creating a bridge with like dies on top, and you put crowns on top of those, you can choose yourself if you want to reduce those crowns on top again or not. So this is why you can select anatomics or copings. Then you select your material as always, and now you have those options here on the right. Since a thimble bridge in this case will be born on implants, in this case 4 implants, we select a screw retained implant base for the 4 copings that we have here. Just to show it again, here you have 4 copings. And we can select a pre-op model, which we have in this case. It's a good idea to activate the option for the virtual gingiva. You can design a virtual gingiva anyway. If you select no, you can do it in the expert mode, but you kind of tend to forget that you have to design it once you don't have it in the wizard workflow. So I always recommend, if you already know that you want to design one, choose at least optional. And then there's the most important new feature here, the design with thimble crown workflow. Here I just selected yes. Again, you see you can always select it in the expert mode anyway. And that's basically it. This is how you set up a thimble crown. In this case, as stated, we have 4 crowns on top of implants. The rest are just Pontics. And we didn't activate any connectors. Since we are going to design a virtual gingiva, this will connect the complete thimble bridge to one piece. So there's no need to activate the connectors at all. So in this case, we don't have an antagonist. So I'm just having 1 stone model only as the scan mode, and I go directly to the design. You see we already have a saved scene. For now, I'm just loading the scan data and we start from scratch, but we will look at different workflows later on as well. Here in this case, I have my pre-op model. The pre-op model in the first step can just be moved around and can be corrected in the position, but in this case, the pre-op model already is on the perfect position, so I'm just going next. But as you can see, we already have the data for our implants here, since we have some implant info files in there as well, so we don't have to find some scan bodies. I can also use the smile creator for this case if I prefer to do that. In this case, since I have a pre-op, that's not really necessary. So for the next step, I can select my margin lines. This is not completely necessary based on the design, but I recommend to do it for the thimble bridges because it's really nice to have a smooth margin line and abutment bottom shape. So here, I'm just selecting the automatic detection. I'm not happy with the detection, or if the shape doesn't match what I imagined, I can easily edit everything. And for the automatic detection, I'm just selecting 4 points. The software does the rest for me. So once you're done, go into the next step. And now you already get your tooth placement. For the thimbles, it's important to know that not every library that we give you is able to be used for this for the thimble workflow. In this case, the generic library can be used for everything. You can create thimbles out of it or cutbacks. And if you right-click on the screen and select Load Custom Model Teeth, you can select another library. With the Plovdiv version, you get 13 different libraries. And one of the new libraries is the exocad library, which also supports the thimble workflow. So I'm going to select this one instead. So here we have our tooth setup, and I can just select the chain mode to move all of the teeth simultaneously. Since I have a pre-op model, it makes sense to orient myself based on that. I'm going to deactivate the show distances because there's no antagonist. And for the chain mode, I personally prefer to start off with one of the first molars, place it in the correct position, can hold down Control to rotate it as well. And then you can lock the position by clicking on this green dot here. And once you do this, you will see that when I now move the other molar, the first molar stays in position, but all of the other teeth, the complete row here, moves in this chain mode. And you see all of them move together and change their size and shape in the same way. So I can lock the second molar as well. And now I'm going to place the canines. First, this one over here. I'll lock it. And now the last one. And you see now the movement is a little bit more hard to do since the chain is now really short. But when I lock the canine as well, I can still move it around. And you see the neighboring teeth, especially here with those premolars, they just change their size to keep the contact points. Like this, I can really quickly set up all of the teeth correctly. I'm just finishing up here a little bit. So since this is only a demo case and I don't have an antagonist, there's no real reason to set up the teeth as perfect as you can. But obviously, in reality, you might spend a little bit more time to have the perfect setup, maybe show it to your dentist as well if this is what he imagined. But for now, this is enough. So I'm going to the next step. And now I can set up my abutment buttons. For this, I normally prefer to hide everything. So I can use my shortcuts for that. I press P for the pre-op and E for the anatomic shapes. If you wonder what the shortcuts exactly are, if you just go up here in the Show Hide menu, you see a tooltip showing you the hotkey as well. So in here, you can design the shape of the abutment bottom. And for this, you have several different tools. What I prefer to do is, at first, I like to use those two buttons here to get a more convex or concave shape. You can click on them, and the more you click, the more convex or concave the shape gets. And then afterwards, you can change the angles. You see here, there's the top angle and the bottom angle. And if I change this one slider, the bottom angle changes to a more concave shape. And this whole area tends to keep really smooth. The software tries to don't give you any hard edges, so you get a real smooth shape in here. So that's it for now with the abutment bottoms. Then I go to the next step. And now I can freeform my anatomic shapes. There's no real reason to do that at the moment. And since I'm going to use the thimble workflow, it's recommended not to change them too much for now. So I'm leaving them as they are. There's no reason to adapt them to anything. Obviously, if I would have an antagonist, there would be a good reason to adapt them to this antagonist. But the base of the pontics does not be, it's not necessary to adapt them yet. They will be adapted later. So now in the step, I can adapt it to the pre-op scan, which I'm not doing in this case. And now here's the step for my virtual walks-up bottom. And you see here, I can select my insertion axis for the whole bridge. And the software calculates based on my insertion axis the complete bottom side that will be cut off of the finished bridge in the end. So you have here in the visualization of the undercuts where you see in what insertion direction this whole bridge will be placed in the patient's mouth. And you also get some values for the bottom properties. They are grayed out at the moment because the software is calculating, but you have an offset of 0.03 millimeters, which is the space between the gingiva and the finished design in the end. Obviously, you can set this to 0, but then everything that's not 100% accurate, that's any mistakes on the impression or in the milling later on, will then be a little bit too harsh of a pressure for the gingiva of the patient. So you see now here there's in blue the bottom of my now walks up, and I can actually freeform this and can add material in specific areas, like here on the papilla to block it out a little bit more, or around the implants to give like the possibility to clean this up a little bit. So for the patient to clean it up later on. I can also remove material here to remove the block out, but I cannot create an intersection through the model. So there's no risk of removing so much block out that the finished bridge will cut through the stone model. This cannot happen. So once I'm happy with that, I'm again going next. Now the software asks me, obviously, if I want to design one complete gingiva for the whole object, or separate gingivas for different parts. Since in the Dental DB, as a reminder, I did not set up any connectors, the software doesn't really know yet what my plan is. So it could theoretically be that I try to design separate single parts as well. That's why I get this dialog here. I want to create one complete bridge, so I'm going with the first option. And now I can draw my gingiva design. It's obviously based on the complete design that I'm striving for. So in this case, I'm trying to design a gingiva. This is where the gingiva mask will connect to the model. And I'm trying to design it as thin as possible with no area underneath where there's room for food storages or whatever. So I'm going really close by the teeth, but it's important to draw the line kind of around the teeth, so the software knows that these teeth will be included for your gingiva design. Because you can also design a gingiva that doesn't include all of the teeth. You could design a gingiva only for the anteriors if you wanted to. And even if I'm not happy with the gingiva design in the end, when I'm getting my merged bridge design, I can still change everything with freeforming. So the properties of the gingiva mask are just a thickness of 1 millimeter in this case. The cervical thickness would be the thickness around the tooth stems, but I can change this individually. As you see here, cervical thickness is an individual parameter for that. This is the initial design for my gingiva mask. As you can see, fairly simple, straightforward design. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to the next step. And now I can freeform this whole thing. There's areas where I say, I want this to be a little bit smoother. For instance, I have my normal freeform tools and can smooth everything, especially here on the palate. I also have some tools to just grab areas and move them around. So I can, for instance, move those papillas here on the posterior area upwards for less areas where you collect dirt while chewing your food. I'm not doing this in the posterior, in the anterior area because this it also doesn't look that nice, to be honest, to have this pupillars filled up. So, and that's it for now for the freeforming for me. Then I'm going to the next step. And now there's a step where I can actually design my thimbles. So here, this is the shrinking part, and I've just selected automatically the Thimble Library. If the tooth library supports thimbles, this will be available. Again, this is only for the generic and the exofan libraries for our generic versions. And you see the thimbles are just like a smaller version of the tooth as a die. It's based on the tooth shape itself. So it's placed in the center of the anatomic shape. And you see here, there's areas where the tooth shape itself is way too low in the gingiva and is hidden, but this is not a problem. So I'm just going to click next because this is what I want to use. And now I can freeform those dies. It would be possible to freeform the dies to pull them upwards so they're not hidden underneath the gingiva anymore. But I'm personally not a fan of that because they're based on the anatomic shape. And if I reform them now, the anatomic shape doesn't really fit them anymore. So one option that you can use, which I kind of forgot at the moment, is that you can switch to the export mode, or in the last step, that's why I'm going. Oh, yeah. Here in your freeforming for your gingiva, it's 2 steps before, I'm still completely forgot it. You have here the option to continue with shrink gingiva. You can also select this in expert mode. That's why I thought of this right now. In the past, you always had to select it in expert mode. But since Plovdiv, after freeforming your gingiva, you have this option here right away to activate it. And then you can just shrink the gingiva, which makes sense if you're using zirconia to shrink the vestibular side of the gingiva a little bit, in this case, 0.2 millimeters. Or if you're using metal as your base, then you obviously have to shrink it a little bit more since you need space for the acrylic veneering. So when you see it automatically marks the base and the palate in blue. This is the same as it would be in a if you shrink a normal crown and you want to have a vestibular veneering. And so I'm just going to press apply, and it shrinks the whole yellow marked area with 0.2 millimeters. Up here you get a window where you have all those options where you can select that it only should mark around the teeth or the base or the palate side. So then I'm going next, and now we're at the thimble shrink. Makes sense. And here I'm going next again. And again, as I told you, you can now freeform the thimbles and move them, but it doesn't make that much sense in my eyes. So I'm again just going next. And now the last step, or the last step for now, is to design the thimble superstructure now, or to continue without thimble superstructure. With the second version, you would just get your finished bridge, and you could mill it or print it or whatever. But now we're going to design the crowns on top of it as well right away. So I'm choosing design thimble superstructure now. And you see, it automatically selects the margin line of the thimble. This is based on the design of the thimbles itself. And so I'm just pressing next. And now the software automatically finds all the margin lines. The software would stop if there was any issue with the margin lines, if one of the thimbles was deformed or there was an uncertainty about it, then I would have to select it manually. But in this case, they are all perfectly found automatically. And the software designs my crown bottoms based on that as well. These are just normal crown bottoms, so I'm just, again, going next. And you see the software calculates my minimum thickness and calculates, based on the anatomic shapes that are set up, my crowns that will be on top of the thimbles later on. I can freeform then again if I want to, and again, I don't want to, so I'm going next. And now I can, again, freeform my gingiva. I could, obviously, theoretically now freeform the gingiva in a way that frees up my thimbles and all. But we have a new option here as well. Now that the crowns are calculated, I get this option, adapt to thimble crowns. It's a small button here. And if I click this, the gingiva mask will automatically be adapted so the crowns can fit on top of it and there's no intersections. The button is a little bit small. You might tend to not see it, but once you press next, the software actually asks you if you maybe want to adapt this as well. So you're not able to just forget to do it. In the end, the software reminds you to adapt the crowns. And you will see now that the software just cuts away the gingiva around the crowns. So my crowns that are placed on top will fit on those thimbles in the end. They can be placed. I can still freeform my gingiva mask now. If I have areas like this and I say, oh, this is a little bit too harsh of a cutoff or too thin of a corner here, I guess this might break later on. So I can just freeform it a little bit and smoothen it. And as always, can just press adapt again. Because now that I freeformed it, it might be that the intersections is back. So the software always has the option to redo all of those adaptations, like the adaptation to antagonists as well. Are there already any questions that we would like to answer?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, Lucas.
I was just going to mention the question that says, what happens if the screw channel goes through the margin or is at the margin level? Does that cause a problem?
Not as far as I know of, no. Because the crown on top of it doesn't include the screw channel automatically. So
yeah, but I would recommend, from my experience, when designing such a structure, it's always better to avoid having the screw channel exiting at the margin, because in that case, you still have this hole, and the hole, then you would have to close the screw channel manually. So the doctor would have to close it manually with some resin or whatever, and therefore it's better to have it in the die of the thimble, so that it will be closed automatically when you put the crown. Or you completely try to exit in the gingiva area, and then you can easily also close it with another material later.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So for the software, it's not a problem. Obviously, for the manual side of things, it might be a problem, yeah. Or it actually will be a problem. But the software doesn't have a problem with it. So now after the gingiva is more or less finished, you still get another option.
Just a moment. There was also an important question, Jan, about the margin and the gingiva. If it is required to adjust the gingiva so that the margin of the thimbles will not be covered with the gingiva, and you recently showed it here, and this is very important to know that this is not required anymore now in the Plovdiv release. You see there's an automatic adjustment of the gingiva. In older releases, yes, when the software was merging all the meshes, then the margin was covered by the gingiva if you did not do an adjustment manually before. Most of the other questions are related to the libraries. I think we will discuss this at the end of your demonstration, and we can show again on the website where to download them. Okay.
So now we're in another shrink step, and this is an option to shrink the crowns that will be placed on top of your thimble bridge. I only get the second shrinking option because here I selected coping and reduced pontics. If I had selected anatomic crowns and pontics, then I wouldn't have this option here, but I could still change it in the expert mode. And this makes sense if you select something like a cutback library, so you get like a vestibular veneering on top of it as well. So if you're using a monochrome material later on and place them on top of your, or plan to place them on top of your thimble bridge, then you can use a little bit of color veneering and all the enamel material to get a nicer tooth shape out of it. Obviously, if you're already using a multi-layer glass ceramic or something, then you can also use a full anatomic shape and still get a beautiful result in the end. Okay. So again, the option to freeform everything, and again, I'm just skipping it. And that's it for this bridge for now. This will be calculated now. You get a complete STL of the bridge, a screw-retained bridge with the thimbles on top of it, and you get one STL per crown that you can also mill or print on in whatever material you want to place them on top of the bridge. I think since it's calculating now, we have time for another question if there's anything right now.
So actually, there are a couple of questions. I think we will keep the interesting question for the end of the demonstration.
Okay.
Because we have a lot of questions to be answered now.
Okay, perfect. So then I can already start talking about the second possible workflow, because now we're finished with this one. You have your complete bridge and your crowns on top of it. But in reality, often, obviously, it's the case that you finish the bridge and you need to redo something on it manually, or you want to apply some opaque coloring on it if it's in case metal, or you just want to do a try-in and an over-impression or whatever you want to do. Not everyone is going to produce the bridge and all of the crowns on top of it at the same time. So the obvious workflow is that you produce the bridge first, send it to your doctor, he does a try-in, and you finish it completely up. Then you rescan the whole bridge, and then you design your anatomic crowns on top of it. And in the past, obviously you can just use this as your model, and this was how you did it in the past. Use this as your model and redraw all the margin lines around the thimbles. Maybe you use your old setup of anatomic shapes as a wax up, or you create a new anatomic setup. But this is a little bit too much work, so you do your whole design 2 times, and we didn't really like this, so we inserted a second workflow here as well, where you can use the rescanned thimble bridge. I'm going to wait until this calculation is finished because I don't want to be too harsh on my small computer, but this is what we're going to do next now.
Friedemann?
Yeah.
Could you maybe show, there was a question about the multi-level shrinking. I think we could maybe show that if we go a step back where you did now the cutbacks, where you selected the cutbacks, maybe you
Yes.
could explain in that step the multi-level shrinking, or maybe you'd like to show that at the end. I don't know.
I think I'm going to show it at the end because now I don't want to
okay, great.
press back while it's calculating.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah. It's taking a little bit longer than expected at this point in time. So I'm just thinking about just finishing it up. Oh yeah, okay. So here's your finished bridge, and on top, the crowns. And you see the thimbles are just underneath it with your screw channels, and you have the crowns on top. Okay, so I'm done with this one. So I'm just pressing, I'm done. And the software will close down. Okay, so now to the second scenario. I'm still using the same case. I'm just going again to design. In this case, the scenario is that you finished up your thimble bridge and didn't select the option to design your thimble crowns right now. So I'm using an already prepared case. Okay, so this is obviously another version of the same bridge. In this case, you see we're already finished. The thimbles are done. The screw channels are here. You have your anatomic shapes on top. In this case, it's the generic tooth library. And now we have in the scenario rescanned the whole thimble bridge after a try-in with the dentist. So for this, I'm reopening the old design and I switch to the expert mode. In my tools, I can select the add remove mesh. And here in the add remove mesh, now in Plovdiv, we have the scan of substructure design. If I select this and load a file, I can load my rescanned primary design, which is also this thimble bridge here, which kind of looks just like this. The screw holes are filled up with wax. There's a little bit of the model visible. You can just move it around. And now if I press OK, the software asks me if I want to get an additional wizard step to align those two designs, the finished bridge and my new scan of the bridge. And obviously I say yes, because normally when you rescan an object, obviously the coordinates are not correct. So when I reopen my wizard, I actually get an alignment step for those two pieces as the first step. As always, if you use a rescan option, and you have your rescan down here on the bottom, and on top you have your model and your finished design, and I have to rotate them in the same viewing direction, and then just select one point that is the same on both of them, and the software automatically aligns them perfectly. So I'm going next, and now again, I'm in my last wizard step. I'm actually done. And if I would select now I'm done and go next, obviously the software would just close down. But now I select design thimble superstructure now, which is the same step I selected before in the first workflow. So I'm not saving this. And now you see the software again finds my margin lines. In this case, it kind of projects it on top of the rescanned bridge. You see here, this is the rescanned bridge, so it's not as, it doesn't have the same hard edges as the design itself. It's a little bit smoother with a little bit of opaque color on top of it, or smoothed by the machine itself. But it tries to find the margin line, and it works pretty well with that. The closer the rescanned design is, obviously, the better the detection of the margin lines work. If it's off, if the thimbles are now reformed or higher or lower than before, maybe the software doesn't find it and will just tell you, hey, this margin line here, maybe draw it manually yourself because it's too far off from the original. But you see, it works quite well. And even if it works quite well, I can still obviously change all of the margin lines. It starts to get a little bit confusing now because you see the merge bridge, but if I hide it, you see that we're working on this rescan now. We again have just a crown bottom step, and we can calculate our crowns right on top of the rescanned version. A workflow like this obviously also makes completely sense if you don't produce the thimble bridge yourself, but you want to produce the crowns on top. So you use a milling center to mill the bridge, they send it to you, and then you rescan the bridge and design crowns on top of it. It's also a very valid workflow. Yeah.
Friedemann, there's one question coming up for the third time now. That's why I told to these guys that we maybe show that at the end. So the question is it possible to create the same hole in the secondary crown? Maybe you'd like to show that at the end with the attachment feature, or maybe no, I don't know.
Yeah, I will show it at the end when they're merged, because if you want to design a hole in a crown for a screw channel, you can use this attachment feature here, but you can only really use it once the complete crown is merged. So I will show it then and explain again in detail.
Then there's another question.
Oh yeah.
Then there's another question, which is here my list assigned to you. Was it you, or is it maybe a mistake? So can I do press to reduction with the top? What's that? Sorry.
I didn't understand the question correct. Sorry.
Can I do a press to reduction with the top for a cymbal bridge? Was it you who assigned it to you, or is it maybe a mistake?
That wasn't me. I'm not doing anything with the questions right now.
That was one I was going to ask at the end, but if you want to answer.
Okay. To be quite honest, I don't understand the question.
So I will ask.
I think they're asking if it's possible after you create copings on the thimble bridge, is it also possible to save the top part, the anatomy part that was cut,
you can
for like a pressed restoration?
The easiest way to use this is to save the anatomy itself as a wax up and then redo the anatomic part as a wax up. If this is what you want to do, so you can always kind of hide all of the pieces. I would recommend to only show the anatomy like this, And you can right click on it and select Save to File and save it here as an STL. Or you can also always right click on the screen itself and save the scene as, and save everything that's visible in the scene at the moment as an STL. And you can reuse this as a voxup with no problem for nearly anything.
Nice, thanks.
So then we'll go to the next step. And now we're back in the shrinking step. In this case, I can again select different cutback libraries. I can also use the normal shrink. And here again, I can also use the exclude selected parts as always. And for exclude selected parts, I can use a brush and color in different areas. Also, what many people like to do is mark everything in blue. The blue parts will not be reduced, and then use the brush holding on the shift key to paint in a yellow area like this, and to get like a vestibular reduction in only one area, or especially if you have like a big bridge like this, it might be faster to just paint the reduction areas and not the areas that are not reduced. So I'm just doing this for the 6 anteriors really quickly. And then I can also show the multi-level cutback in this case. So if I now shrink those areas here for like, let's say 0.4 millimeters, you see only the yellow marked areas are shrinked. But if I want now to have a little bit of extra space for all around all of the crowns for a glaze effect or whatever, then I can use here the multi-level cutback. And I can here select reshrink the reduced shapes. I mean, my vestibular select shapes are now actually also for the software are also reduced shapes. All of those are actually reduced, even though it's 0 millimeter or here only in the front. And if I reshrink the reduced shapes and now select maybe 0.2 for a glaze material, and then I say clear all, I can just again say apply. And now all of them get shrink just a little bit, just 0.2 millimeters. You see you have your room for your glaze material, but you still get your complete anatomic shape. Maybe 0.2 is a little bit much, kind of went too high with this parameter. Yeah.
I'd like to come back to a question we already discussed before. Maybe something was not clear. So it looks like the question was about pressed crowns. So if it's possible to choose a pressed crown or to define a pressed crown on a Cymbal.
To be honest, I never actually tried that. It might be possible. I cannot answer this question right now. I think we should have to get back per email for this.
Yeah, that's really good point. So to be honest, I was hoping that you'll be able to answer, because I don't know that either. I think in theory it's not possible to choose a pressed crown in the DB with a Cymbal workflow directly, but we have to. Maybe we can try that at the end.
So no, it's not available for that. No, sorry.
You checked? Okay.
Yeah, I'm opening the DB as we speak, and the option is just not there for the Thimble workflow.
Okay. Yeah, and I think if you're just choosing a pressed crown, maybe you are able to, in the shrinking step, to choose the Cymbals, but I don't think that this works.
Yeah, I don't so either.
Okay.
So moving to the next step. Again, the freeforming as always. And now it's the same. We get our finished design for our crowns. And that's it actually with the complete workflow for our Thimble bridges. There's the 2 different workflows which make completely sense based on the structure of your laboratory or the case itself. So I think it's all there for everybody, however you want to design those bridges. And I think now we can fully delve into the Q&A.
Okay. Yeah. So as I already said, Lucas, maybe you'd like to start.
Yeah, one that's probably an easier question, Friedemann. Somebody was asking, so the demo case here loaded with the implant positions already there, and you saw the implant parts. So what happens if you're importing a scan with scans of scan bodies? Does it let you align the implants during design?
Yeah, then it's the normal workflow you always have when you have scan bodies. Then you first select the scan bodies to detect the position of the implants, and after that, it's just the same workflow. There's no difference in that.
Okay,
and then there were a couple.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael.
I think at this stage now, it's the best moment to show maybe how to create your hole in the secondary structure. So if you
I forgot about that.
to Freeform Restorations.
Yeah. Good that you're saying it. I completely forgot it again. So you go to Freeform Restorations in the end. Since now the STL files of your crowns are one singular piece, the bottom and the top side of the crown are merged together. So if you go now to the Freeform Restorations, you actually have the possibility, if you use your attachments, to create holes through the complete crown. If you do it in a step before, you cannot create a complete hole through the crown, only through the top of the crown, and then the minimum thickness will be applied again. So in the attachment step here, you can select what type of attachment you want to use. The generic one is just a Brissy vertex piece. And you can actually select all different types of attachments, and you can create your own parametric designs, in this case based on a rotation. This sounds a little bit more complicated, but you just use this 2D picture here to create a 3D object, which just gets rotated. So I'm going to just select something that's fairly simple, just like this. And here in this crown, I want to create my screw holes. I'm just placing this here, just clicking on top of it. And now right-clicking on it, I can actually parallelize the attachment to different things like the library geometry or the screw channel, or to my implant directly. In this case, I'm just going to align it to the implant to show it to you. And you see now it's gone. And it's not gone, it's just aligned here to the implant because this is down here. And I can move this around. And if I hold down my shift button, I can only move it up and down. So it always will be aligned to my screw channel, which is in my eyes the simplest way to place it perfectly.
Or you simply change the height in the profile window, and furthermore, you also have to define the exact width of your screw channel here in the profile window, and then you have exactly the same hole as you have it in the primary structure. And you have
one thing after the other.
yeah, because I just wanted to remind you that you forgot to click on subtract here.
Oh, so I kind of forgot that it changes the parameters.
Because,
again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's correct,
then you have to restart. Yeah.
Then I can show it again on shift, move it, change the height, and the width obviously needs to be the width of your screw channel, which I don't know yet at the moment because I don't know what kind of implant library this is.
You can choose
it's relative. Excuse me?
The 2.3 is a very common diameter for a screw head.
Yeah, or I can use my eyesight and just looks more like 2. Let's say 4 in this case. Obviously, it's better if you know exactly what kind of parameter you have for your screw channel. And then my crown is completely, the screw channel I'm setting up now completely intersects the crown. And then it's really important, you have here an option called allow any changes. And this option allows you to use the subtract attachment to completely cut a hole through it. If you don't activate this, it will still take the minimum thickness in regards to that, and you don't get a hole completely through your crown. Just press apply, and you have a hole in your crown, which in this case nearly perfectly aligns with the screw channel. On our YouTube channel, we actually have a video explaining the attachment feature in more detail. where all of those little things I just did and changed are explained for a way longer amount of time. I really recommend that video.
Okay, Lucas.
Yeah, there's a couple questions regarding using bridges for the Thimble workflow. Is it possible to add connectors to your crowns? And if you do that, what's the best way to tell if your thimbles are parallel and the bridge will draw? Maybe kind of explain a little bit about that.
Okay, so at the moment,
that's a good question. Yes.
Yeah. At the moment, there's no option to really make sure that your thimbles are completely parallel. So you have to kind of just take a look at it. There is a feature in the works for the future where those thimbles also will be parallelized. To be quite honest, I've never tried out to create a bridge on top of the thimbles, but I don't really see a problem with that if I would go in the expert mode and connect them. Has any one of you two ever tried it?
That should work. So
yeah,
I think you can even in the DB already connect it.
So I'm just switching.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't see the option at the moment to connect them here. I think it might not be possible yet. I'm not 100% sure. It's also something we might have to get back to you.
I was sure that this is possible. I have to double check it.
Because you can also theoretically set up connectors between the thimbles themselves, so it might be confusing for the software which parts to connect.
Yeah, but I think to remember that we have tested that. Could you just check in the Dental DB? There's a possibility to put the connector. Yeah. So this is, I know that this works. I have to double check if it's not possible in the expert mode. Maybe we have to add that as a feature request then.
Okay.
Then there's another question. Can we add retentions to the vestibulars? Yes. But in that case, you have to use the attachment feature, and then you have to place every retention individually, so which might be maybe time consuming.
Yeah.
I think to know that we are actually working, or we have a ticket to have that in the future. Further, or you could also use the partial framework software to do that by defining a spline. This would be then much more efficient, yes.
But to be honest, to place retentions here on those thimble crowns sounds kind of like you would want to create those out of metal, and I don't think this makes much sense, to be honest.
There's one question I don't really understand: how to close holes to fabricate crowns. So in the primary part, you don't have to close the hole.
If you design the thimble crowns right on top of it, there's no reason to close the holes. The software ignores the hole for the crown on top of it, for lack of better terms. If you want to import it and want to close the holes, you can always just right-click. This is a little bit more work aroundy, but you can always right-click on any object and say Edit Mesh. And then you can just select the area where the hole is. In this case, it's a complete screw hole, so the mesh itself doesn't really contain a hole. It's completely closed. So I'm going to cut away this screw channel design here, completely here with delete. And then completely mark this open border here and press close holes like this. This is the easiest way to close those screw channel holes. Again, if you just directly design the crowns on top, you don't need to do this. And if you rescan the whole thing, it would make more sense to close those with wax beforehand.
Let's see. Another question: is it possible to make a thimble crown for a single tooth, or is it only for bridges?
Should be possible as far as I know. I don't really understand the reason to do it, but it would actually be possible. I mean, what you have to keep in mind, those thimbles are based on the shape of the anatomic shape on top of it. And if you reshape the anatomic shape, the thimble doesn't really follow that. So if you have a big die and you want to place a thimble on top of it, kind of starts to distort everything a little bit and doesn't really work that nice anymore. Mm-hmm. So I would not really recommend doing that.
We have another question here. Can we make telescopic cymbal? I don't really understand the reason of this. Friedemann, maybe you have an idea?
I also don't really understand the reason. I think it's to create primary and secondary crowns in the same workflow. The thimbles themselves are not parallel. As you see, they're a little bit conical. So what I would recommend instead is directly use the primary telescope, the telescopic crown workflow to design your primary telescope, and use the anatomy that is designed there as well as a wax up for your secondary crowns later on. Makes more sense that way, because the primary telescopes, designing them in the same workflow as the secondary telescopes, has such a huge load of possible issues. Everything where you create the primary and the secondary at the same time, the machine have to be super accurate. The fit in the patient's mouth has to be perfect. There should be no change in that. I would not risk doing this, to be honest.
Yeah. There is one remark from Nathalie, quite funny. Yeah, he just told me that maybe you forgot earlier to delete the merged parts to add the connectors. I thought that you did it, but
they are deleted at the moment.
Then it should work.
They're not merged, as far as I'm concerned. No, only the substructure.
Then it should work to connect them. Maybe just try again. I have to go.
Maybe further back. What happens now? The substructure, maybe it also has to be deleted. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, you can try that.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Then it should work.
Oh yeah, now there's obviously, because the substructure needs to be able to be adapted to the connectors as well. Is what is my theory now. Okay. Then you can just connect all of the crowns individually, or you can do it in the DentalDB at the start right away.
Sometimes the primary framework of the Cymbal shows a lot of undercuts for the milling. How can we correct it? And even 5X machine do not mill it properly. Okay, normally the cymbals have been designed in a way that there is no undercut in the cymbal itself, and there's also already the tool diameter is already considered in the shoulder here of the cymbal. Maybe you could send us a case to feedback@exocad.com, which shows us which case is really showing problems here, that we can do some investigation, or that we can have a look what we can improve here maybe.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind is that the thimbles, the direction of the thimbles is based on the anatomic shape on top of it, because this is kind of like a shrunken version of the anatomic shape. So if you place the anatomic shapes in very different directions, obviously the thimbles themselves also tend to have very different directions at the moment. But as far as I know, this will be improved in the future.
Okay, there was a question right at the beginning about curves in the implant geometry. So actually, we export in the construction info, we export the position of the implant geometry, and we export the curve of the emergence profile border. But we are actually not able to export the curves of the implant geometry. Some implant manufacturer would not be very happy with that. If it's an open STL, if it's an open geometry, you should then create in your CAM software your own macro for every implant geometry instead of having the curves directly in the construction info. Friedemann, maybe now we could show shortly the multi-level shrinking, or did you do that already?
I already showed it. Oh, I've already shown it.
Okay. Then you could maybe just show on our website the page where to download all the libraries and just explain it.
Wow. But I'm doing this private mode. So on our homepage, it's still switched to German. Okay. So on our homepage here, we have here in the integration tab our download portals for the DentalCAD libraries, the exoplan libraries, and the full denture library integration. What's the question about this exactly, or am I just confused at the moment? What did you?
It's a very, very frequently asked question about where to get the library, how to install the library, or what kind of libraries do we provide. So actually, first of all, there was also one question about the tools libraries. So the tools libraries cannot be downloaded on our website. They are part of the software. I would also not recommend to use or to ask a friend who has a newer version to ask to get a new tools library, for example, from Plovdiv, and to install this into Matera. This could lead to inconstant, or this could lead to problems in your software while designing, because we are always improving the libraries and the software together. For example, there might be new features in the library which will be then used in different steps in the software. So it could lead to problems to do that. On our website, you can now download any kind of implants, prosthetic parts of the planning for implants and sleeves. You can also download tools libraries for your denture restorations, but the normal cut tools libraries cannot be downloaded here. If you'd like to have additional tools libraries, there's an add-on module, the ZRS tools library add-on module, which can be activated on a dongle, and this will automatically download additional libraries to your software version. Maybe you show it just Friedemann where to download this.
Okay, so on our website here in integration, we have the DentalCAD library integration, the exoplan library integration, or the full denture library integration. DentalCAD library integration is for your implant libraries to use in your CAD, also the ones for the model creator. And down here you have all the different providers, and you can sort them by the letter, or you can also only show the ones that have a model creator library as well. And if you select one, I'm just going with the first one, you see here you can download your model creator libraries or your normal DentalCAD libraries, and just add them to the download list. And once you have everything you want in your download list, just click here, go to the next side, and here you have to fill out your dongle serial number. So you have to have a working license, and then you have to fill out your email address and your name and so on. And then you get an email address, an email with a download link for that. There's also a small instruction PDF showing you exactly how to install the libraries and so on. But if you have any questions specifically for that, always just ask your reseller. They are always happy to help you. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think we've answered all the questions that I have set aside here.
So there's so many questions about the library. So I think we try to answer to those questions later in the mail after the webinar. Okay. Is there anything from your side, Lucas?
Yeah, I think that's about it. All the interesting ones that I pulled aside here, we went over. It looks like we covered everything, like you said, except for the library questions here. So yeah, I think we're probably at a good stopping point.
Yeah, a couple of questions here we already answered. How to parallelize the symbols.
So
okay.
As a reminder, this webinar will be able to be reviewed by you again. We'll get a recording for that as well. So if there's already some answers for that in there, you can just rewatch the same webinar again and get all of those answers.
Yeah, actually all the videos are available on the web page directly and on the page for the webinars, where you can also register for upcoming webinars. For all the webinars that we already have shown, you can download then the video, and in a couple of weeks we will upload all the videos together on our YouTube channel. Just by the way, today we also published another interesting video about one of our exoplant beta testers on our YouTube channel. So stay tuned on our channel and have a look on all the videos we are publishing there. Okay, I think time is running out. Friedemann, thank you for the demonstration, and all you guys, thank you for being here. And we still have a couple of questions, and Lucas will try to answer to those questions when we get the report from the webinar, and it might take some time, maybe tomorrow or in 2 days you will get email with the answer to the questions. Okay.
Okay then. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.